the crash, and the stranger. The night was quiet. The desert wind moved slowly across the empty land. Stars filled the dark sky. Everything was peaceful. Daniel sat alone outside his small house. He was drinking warm tea and looking at the stars. It was something he did every night since the accident. He lived far from the city. No noise, no people, just silence. Then, the sky changed. A loud boom echoed in the air. The ground shook. Daniel stood up fast. He saw something fall from the sky, burning like fire. It crashed somewhere close, maybe just 1 or 2 miles away. What was that? He whispered. He grabbed his flashlight, keys, and ran to his truck. The drive was short, but the road was dark and full of dust. Daniel reached a small valley. Smoke was rising in the air. His heart beat faster. In the middle of the field, there was a glowing object half buried in the ground. It looked like a pod, silver smooth, not from this world. Daniel slowly walked towards it. His flashlight flickered. As he got closer, he saw the glass window of the pod was cracked. Something was moving inside. He stopped. Fear touched his chest. But curiosity was stronger. Inside he saw a woman. Not a normal woman. Her skin was light blue. Her eyes were silver. She was holding her arm. It was clearly broken. Her face showed pain. And fear. Daniel whispered, "Oh my God." The alien woman looked at him. For a second, time stopped. They stared at each other. No words. Just eyes. She didn't speak. She didn't move. But Daniel saw something in her eyes. Not danger, but pain. And trust. Daniel slowly touched the side of the pod. It opened with a soft hiss. The woman fell into his arms. He brought her back to his house. She was light, almost like air. He placed her on the couch and covered her with a blanket. Her arm was swollen. He knew a little bit of first aid from his past job. He brought a splint, bandages, and water. "I don't know if you understand me," he said, "but I'm going to help you." She didn't answer, but she watched him closely. Daniel gently touched her arm. She winced in pain, but didn't pull away. He wrapped it carefully. Her skin felt warm and soft, not human, but not scary. He gave her water. She drank slowly. Her silver eyes never left his face. "What's your name?" Daniel asked. She pointed to herself. Then, slowly, softly, she said, "Kyra." Kyra. Daniel repeated. She nodded. Then she pointed at him. "Daniel," he said. She nodded again. For the next few hours, Daniel stayed with her. He brought soup. She didn't eat much, but she tried. He gave her a pen and paper. She didn't know how to write English, but she drew something. A planet, a spaceship, fire, explosions. Then, a small figure running away. "A pod Earth you escaped," Daniel said, understanding the picture. Kyra looked down and nodded. She turned the paper and drew something else. A large dark shape in the sky. Above Earth, it looked like a machine or a ship. Daniel frowned. "What is that?" Kyra looked at him, and for the first time, spoke a full sentence. "They are coming." Daniel's heart stopped for a moment. "Who?" he asked. She pointed to the sky. Boom. Another sound. Loud, closer. Daniel ran to the window. Red lights flashed in the clouds. He saw small flying shapes moving fast above the mountains. "They were not stars. They followed you?" Daniel asked. Kyra stood up, even though she was weak. She touched a small round device on her belt. A blue shield flashed around the house for a second, then vanished. Daniel stared at the sky. His hands were shaking. "What is this?" he said. "What have I gotten into?" Kyra slowly touched his arm. She looked into his eyes again. "Help me," she said. Daniel looked at her. She was afraid, alone, and injured. But she was also brave. And something inside him, something broken for a long time, felt alive again. He nodded. "I'll help you." The sky was turning orange as the sun began to rise above the mountains, casting a soft light over the desert. Daniel sat by the window, watching the alien woman sleep on the couch, her arms still wrapped in the bandages he had used the night before. Her face looked peaceful. Now, not full of fear like before. He made some tea, slowly and quietly, trying not to wake her. He looked at her strange device sitting on the table beside her. It looked like a small circle made of metal, with lights that blinked every few seconds. He did not dare touch it. He did not know what it could. Dokiera opened her eyes. Slowly she looked around, and then at him. Daniel gave her a small smile, and held out a cup of tea. She took it with both hands, her injured arm shaking a little. She nodded once in thanks. They sat in silence, drinking tea. The quiet was not awkward. It was soft, gentle, like two people who did not need words to understand each other. Daniel stood up and brought paper and a pencil. He placed it on the table, and then, sat across from her. He drew a house, then a stick figure of himself, and pointed to it. Then he pointed to himself. Kara watched him, and then took the pencil. She drew a round shape with stars around it, and then a line showing a small ship flying away. She pointed to the ship, then to herself. They kept drawing back and forth. She drew explosions and strange shadowy shapes chasing her. Daniel drew Earth and pointed to it, then to the window, as if saying welcome. She nodded slowly, her eyes showing a mix of sadness and hope. Later, Daniel tried to make some food. He cooked eggs and toast, and placed the plate in front of her. She looked at it confused at first, but then tasted it carefully. She smiled just a little, and he laughed a short, happy sound. It had been a long time since he laughed. He walked outside for a moment to check the sky. It was clear, no strange lights, no sounds from the night before, but he knew something was coming. He could feel it deep inside, something bigger than he could understand. Care came outside too. She moved slowly, holding her arm with care. She looked at the trees, the dirt, the blue sky, and smiled as if seeing it all. For the first time she sat down on the ground and placed the small device from her belt onto the sand. It opened up like a flower, lights spinning and rising from it. A hologram appeared above them, showing her home world. It was beautiful, green and blue like earth, then fire, then darkness, then the sky filled with ships falling and crashing. She pointed to it all, then to herself, then to Earth. Daniel watched every second carefully. He understood. Now she was not just running, she was warning them. Her world had been destroyed, and now the same danger might be coming here. Suddenly, she pressed something on the device, and a new image showed up. It was Earth, but not like now. It was covered in fire, cities, burning oceans, turning black, strange dark shapes moving through the sky. Daniel stepped back, shocked. Kyra looked at him, and her voice broke the silence for only the second time. Soon Daniel felt fear, but also something else. He felt like he had to protect her no matter what, even if the whole world would not believe them. He would stand with her. They went back inside, and he brought out an old map of the area. He pointed to different places, caves, mountains, old military bases. Maybe they could hide, maybe they could find someone who could help. Kyra took the map and touched a small spot near the bottom, then looked at him, her eyes serious. It was like she knew something was hidden there, something important. She stood up slowly and walked to the window, pointing at the sky, and then placed her hand over her heart, as if trying to say, "We are not safe here." Daniel nodded. He felt it too. This house was no longer safe. Not after what she showed him, not after what he saw last night. Night came again, and with it the silence returned. Daniel sat by the window, watching the stars. Kyra sat across the room, repairing a small piece of her broken suit. She worked with care and focused. Suddenly, a sound came from outside, like a low hum. Daniel stood and looked through the glass, but saw nothing. He opened the door slowly. The wind was moving the trees a little, but there was something else in the air, like the world was holding its breath. Kara stood behind him, her face calm but ready. She held the small device in her good hand. Daniel looked at her and asked softly, "Are they coming now?" She did not answer with words. She just looked at the stars. Daniel closed the door and locked it, then walked back to the couch. He sat down and looked at her again. He whispered, "Well, figure it out." Kara sat down across from him, and for a long time they just sat there, in the quiet desert house, two strangers from different worlds. No words, just eyes. The bond between them was growing stronger, something deep, something true. And outside in the sky, something else was moving in the dark. The wind was colder that night, and the moon was hidden behind thick clouds, as if the sky itself was afraid to watch what was coming. Daniel sat awake near the window. Kyra was sitting on the floor, fixing a small silver disc that kept flickering. In her hand, her fingers moved quickly, like she had done this 100 times before. Daniel looked out across the desert. Everything was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your heart beat louder than it should. He picked up the old binoculars from the shelf and scanned the horizon. Nothing moved, but his gut told him something was coming. Kara suddenly stood up, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, as if she heard something. Daniel heard nothing, but then a soft vibration ran through the floor, like a deep drum far away under the ground. He looked at her. She nodded once, then held up 3 fingers, 3 of them. Daniel grabbed the small alien device she gave him the night before. It was shaped like a rock, but once pressed it turned into a thin shield-like energy made of light and air. He did not know how it worked, but she had said one thing when she handed it to him: "Protect yourself. If I fall." Kara moved to the door silently, her broken arm now supported by a glowing band she had placed around it earlier. The pain seemed less now, but her face was focused. Ready, she touched the door with her palm, and a small scanner blinked red, then green, then vanished. Daniel followed her outside. Slowly, the air was thick with dust and tension. They both crouched behind an old truck. He looked up and saw a faint red glow behind a hill. Something was floating low near the ground. Then the silence broke. A sharp screech cut through the air, and a black triangular shape shot over their heads. It had no wings, no lights, just a smooth surface, and a trail of red sparks behind it. Kyra pulled Daniel down and pressed a button on her belt. Instantly, they were surrounded by a soft blue light. Invisible from outside, she whispered one word. In her alien tongue hidden, they stayed still, as two more shapes passed above their heads, searching, scanning, moving like wolves, looking for lost prey. Daniel watched them disappear over the hill, but then the first one came back slower, this time lower, as if it smelled them. Kyra looked at Daniel, and pointed toward the rocks behind the house. He nodded, and they ran without a sound, each step careful, each breath quiet as they reached the rocks. Kyra took out a small sphere, and rolled it on the ground. It projected a false heat signature near the barn, far from where they stood. The ship took the bait, it turned sharply, and flew toward the barn. Firing a silent beam that sliced through the wooden walls, the structure exploded into dust and fire. Daniel covered his ears from the shockwave, his heart beating faster than ever. Kyra touched his shoulder, and signaled to move. Now they ran across the field, and into the dry riverbed behind the property. It led into the hills, dark and narrow, but safe for the moment. Daniel stopped to catch his breath. Kyra was already checking a new signal on her wrist device. Small lights blinking in different colors. She looked up and pointed to a mark on the map, an old underground station, buried since the last war. Daniel remembered stories about it, full of old tech and sealed doors. Maybe now it was their only hope. As they walked deeper into the canyon, Kyra handed Daniel a small chip. It was thin and cold. She said, "It holds the core. If they get me, take this and run. Do not stop. Do not turn back." Daniel looked at the chip, then at her, and said softly, "We do this together. No one is left behind." Kyra stared at him for a moment, then placed a hand on his chest, just above the heart, and said one word, strong. Suddenly, a noise echoed behind them. Heavy boots, metal sounds. Someone or something was following fast. They had been found again. Daniel grabbed her hand, and they ran deeper into the canyon, dodging rocks and jumping over fallen branches behind them. The red lights returned, shining like eyes in the dark. Then Kyra stopped. She turned around and took out a small weapon. It looked like a silver rod, but when activated, it turned into a spear of light. She stood firm, ready to fight. Daniel looked at her, and understood she needed to buy him time, but he refused to leave. He picked up a rock, and threw it at the cliff wall above, creating a small avalanche of stones. It slowed down the chasers, giving them a few seconds to escape. Kyra smiled, and they both ran again, until they found a metal door half buried in the sand. Daniel wiped off the dirt and found a panel. Kyra placed her hand on it. The scanner read her skin, and the door opened slowly, with a deep creak, revealing a tunnel of darkness. They stepped inside, and the door closed behind them, locking out the world above. Kyra turned on a light, and the walls lit up with old symbols and warnings in both English and alien language. Daniel looked at her, and said, "What is this place?" She answered softly, "Where it all began." The air inside the tunnel was thick and old, filled with dust and echoes of a forgotten time. Every step they took echoed through the metal walls, reminding Daniel of stories his grandfather used to tell about the Cold War, about secret bases built deep underground for battles that never came. But this place was different. It was not only old, it was watching. Kyra moved ahead, her light device casting long shadows on the walls. She placed her hand on strange panels, and old doors opened without sound. Symbols lit up under her fingers, not in English, not in any language Daniel had ever seen. He followed her deeper into the unknown, his mind full of questions, but his heart full of fire. Thought of his old life, the empty rooms, the silence, the loss that used to weigh on his chest like a stone. But now he was running through darkness, with someone not human, someone who had shown him more courage in 3 nights than he had felt in 3 years. Kyra stopped near a large door, unlike the others. This one was thick, made of metal and stone, with warning signs in both human and alien text. She looked at Daniel, then opened a small slot, and pulled out a strange key shaped like a spiral. It glowed faintly, and hummed as she placed it into the lock. The door opened slowly with a deep moan, revealing a large chamber filled with machines. Screens, wires, and floating spheres, all covered in dust and time, but alive the moment they stepped inside. Lights blinked, machines hummed, and a low voice began to speak in a language Daniel did not know. Kyra answered with firm words, her voice strong and clear. The room accepted her like she belonged here, like she had come home. Daniel watched in awe as she touched a panel, and a massive map of Earth appeared above them, with points marked in red and blue, moving slowly, glowing like stars falling from the sky. Kyra pointed to one of the red marks. It pulsed like a heartbeat. Then she touched her chest, and then the map. Daniel understood the meaning. Her people had hidden something on Earth, something powerful, and now others were coming to take it, to use it to destroy. She looked at him, and spoke carefully, using the few English words she had learned. You help me, we stop them together. Daniel nodded without thinking. His fear burned away by something stronger purposed. They gathered supplies from the chamber. Kyra found an energy pack for her weapon, and gave Daniel a small device like a bracelet. She explained through gestures that it was a shield. It would protect him once, maybe twice, but then it would burn out. They left the chamber and took a narrow path leading out of the base through a hidden tunnel behind a rusted door. Outside, the sun was rising over the hills, painting the sky with colors of fire, and hoped the world looked the same. But Daniel knew it was not the same anymore. They moved fast using back roads and dry riverbeds, avoiding open spaces. Kyra checked her tracker again and again. Red dots moved closer, faster. They were being hunted, not just by machines, but by something more alive, more ruthless. At a small gas station long abandoned, Kyra stopped and scanned the area. She found an old truck under a torn, covered, dusty, but working with some wires and sparks. She brought it to life. Daniel watched impressed, then helped her load the gear into the back seat. They drove through the desert wind, in their faces silence between them, but not empty silence. Full of meaning, full of everything they could not say with words. Kyra stared at the horizon. Daniel stared at her, and somewhere deep inside he felt his broken pieces coming back together. As they crossed an old bridge, a sound rose behind them. Like thunder without clouds, Kyra turned her head and saw two flying crafts closing in fast, black sleek wings glowing red. They had found them again. Daniel pressed the pedal hard. The truck roared forward, dust flying behind them. Kyra leaned out the window and aimed her weapon. A beam of blue light shot toward the nearest craft. It hit the wing, and the ship spun out of control, crashing into the sand with a loud screech. The second craft fired a pulse that shook the truck, sending it off the road. Daniel struggled to keep control of the vehicle, hit a rock and flipped once, landing hard in the sand. They crawled out, coughing, bruised. But Alavikora stood fast, weapon ready. The second craft hovered low, its door opened, and something stepped out, tall, armored, eyes glowing with fire. It was not machine, not man, but something in between, a hunter from her world. She looked at Daniel, then stepped forward alone. She spoke in her language, sharp and strong. The hunter answered with a growl, then charged at her, fast and brutal. Their weapons clashed, light against shadow. Daniel watched frozen, then remembered the bracelet on his wrist. He ran toward Kyra. Just as the hunter raised its blade, he tackled the creature and activated the shield. The hunter flew back, stunned. Kyra used the moment and fired a direct shot to the chest. The hunter fell to the ground, defeated, silent, breathing heavy. She looked at Daniel with wide eyes, and for the first time she smiled fully. Not a soft smile, but one of real connection, real thanks, real trust. He smiled back, his face dirty, his heart loud. The journey had begun, not just to save a world, but to rebuild what was lost inside both of them. The sky was soft and quiet, as the wind moved gently over the open land, carrying with it the scent of dust and dry grass, the kind of morning that hides pain behind light and warmth. Kyra sat by a broken stone, holding her side, where the impact had left a long, shallow wound, her breath slow and calm, as if pain had become just another part of her journey. Daniel stood nearby, collecting pieces of equipment thrown from the truck during the crash. His hands scratched, his clothes torn, but his focus clear. Each step he took was no longer for survival alone. It was for her, for both of them, because somewhere in the last few days, she had stopped being an alien and started becoming something else, something important. He walked back to her with a bottle of water and knelt beside her, offering it with a small smile. She took it with tired fingers and drank slowly, her eyes meeting his with something more than thanks. It was recognition, it was understanding without needing words. Kyra reached into her belt and pulled out a soft green crystal, shaped like a tear. It glowed faintly. In the light she placed it in his hand and closed his fingers around it, then pointed to his chest and nodded. Daniel looked at the crystal, confused, but he could feel a strange warmth from it, like it was alive, like it could feel his heartbeat. He looked at her and asked softly, "What is this?" And she answered with one word: memory. Daniel held the crystal near his chest, and suddenly, he was no longer sitting in the desert. He was standing inside a memory, not his but hers. He saw a tall silver tower rising into a sky filled with two suns. He saw Kyra laughing with someone who looked like her, but younger, smaller, her sister. He realized then came the fire. The sky turned dark, machines fell from above, people running, screaming, trying to hold each other as the world fell apart. Kyra had grabbed her sister and tried to escape, but a blast separated them forever. She screamed her name once, twice, then silenced. Daniel dropped the crystal and gasped as the vision ended. Kyra looked away, hiding her face, but her hands trembled. He reached forward and held her hand, not to comfort with words, but to say, "I saw, I know, and I am here." They sat in silence again, but it was not heavy. It was shared, like two souls sitting beside the ruins of their past and choosing not to walk away as The day passed. Kyra began working on the tracker again, repairing broken wires, connecting strange shapes. Daniel helped where he could, holding tools, following gestures, and learning that sometimes building things is how people rebuild themselves. By sunset, the tracker beeped once, then lit up with a soft yellow glow. She smiled faintly and pointed to a place on the map. 3 hills to the north, a hidden cave under the rocks where she had stored something important, something that could end this chase once and for all. They packed quickly whatever they could carry, then began walking through the valley step by step, sharing water, sharing looks, sometimes even a small laugh when Daniel tripped on a rock and Kyra raised one eyebrow. In that way only she could do that night. They camped under a dead tree, its branches twisted like frozen arms. Daniel lit a small fire with care. Kyra sat close and brought out a thin object that looked like a flute, but made of light. She raised it to her lips and began to play it. Sound was like nothing he had heard, soft and full of longing, like stars singing to the moon. Daniel closed his eyes and let the music wrap around him, touching places inside that had long been forgotten, places where he kept old memories, locked away. When the song ended, he opened his eyes and looked at her, and in that moment he told her everything, not with words, but with his eyes. With the way his shoulders fell, with the way his hand reached out and touched hers, she understood care. Leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his accustomed from her world, a sign of deep trust and shared soul. Daniel did not move. He let the silence speak everything he could not say. The night grew cold, but their fire stayed warm as they lay on the ground side by side, not touching, not speaking, just breathing together. 2 broken hearts starting to beat in rhythm. Again in the distance, a low hum whispered through the valley, a reminder that the enemy was still out there, still hunting, still coming. But for now they had a moment of peace, a moment to feel human. A moment to feel Alavekara. Looked at the stars and whispered something in her language, a blessing maybe, hope or a prayer. Daniel closed his eyes and whispered back, not knowing the words, just feeling the meeting. Tomorrow they would fight again. Tomorrow they would face whatever came, but tonight she had given him music, and he had given her silence, and between them something had begun to heal. The cave was cold and silent, hidden beneath the northern hills like a secret, waiting to be found. Its entrance marked only by twisted rocks and broken shrubs, barely enough to show that something lived beneath the surface. Kyra moved first, her step steady, her mind clear. Daniel followed close behind, holding the small scanner she gave him, its screen blinking softly with blue light, tracking the signal that brought them here. The path inside was narrow and dark, the walls tight with sharp stones, but neither of them hesitated. They had come too far now, too close to turn back. Kyra held up her hand, and a light flickered from her wrist, guiding the way forward, revealing markings along the cave walls. Symbols from her world, mixed with human numbers and codes. Daniel watched them pass like ancient art carved by 2 civilizations who never meant to meet. At last they reached a chamber, wide and tall, like a temple from another age. In the center stood a black stone structure shaped like a cube, floating just inches above the ground, its surface glowing, with deep red veins pulsing like a slow heartbeat. Kyra stepped forward and placed both hands on its sides. The cube responded, instantly opening itself with a quiet hiss, revealing what lay within. Our sphere of light hovered in the center, clear and bright, spinning slowly as if it was alive. Kyra turned to Daniel and spoke softly, her voice calm but full of meaning. This is the core, the last piece of power from my world. It can save this planet or end it. Daniel looked at the sphere, unsure of what he was seeing, but he could feel something from it, like warmth and fear wrapped in one, like standing near a storm just before the wind begins to scream. He asked her what it needs to work, and she answered, just one life. He stepped back, eyes wide as her words echoed through the cave. The core needed to be bonded to a living soul. To activate, once connected, it could destroy the invading ships with one pulse, wiping them from the sky, or it could become a weapon that others would chase. Kyra explained that her people once used such power to defend against the same enemy, now chasing them across galaxies, but every use left a mark. Every bond left someone broken or worse. Daniel looked at her and saw the weight she carried, the guilt of escaping, the guilt of surviving. They argued without raising their voices, each trying to protect the other. She said she would take the risk. He said no, not again, not after everything he had lost, not after finally finding someone who made him feel whole again. Kyra listened, and then told him this choice was not about who deserved to live, but who was willing to carry the pain of saving others. The ground shook a little as the enemy drew closer. Kyra's tracker lit up with red signals, 10 maybe more, flying toward the hills. Their time was nearly gone. Daniel reached for the core, but Kyra stopped him, her eyes filled with tears. She had held back for too long. She said she was not afraid to die, but she was afraid to lose him. Daniel pulled her close and whispered into her ear, then kissed her forehead gently, like she once did to him under that old tree in the desert there. Hearts were not the same species, not even the same language, but they spoke in something deeper. Suddenly, the cave entrance roared with fire as a blast struck the rocks outside, shaking everything loose. Kyra pulled Daniel down as another beam hit, the walls sending stone and light crashing inwards. The enemy had arrived. They had no more time to think. Cora stood and lifted the core, holding it tight as the energy began to rise around her. Her skin glowing faintly, her eyes shining like the stars. She came from Daniel, shouted her name, and she turned to him smiling one last time, her voice strong as she said, "Remember you healed me then." Without warning, she pressed the core to her chest, and the light consumed her. Everything flashed white. Then silence, then sound, then the world shifted. A pulse tore through the cave, and into the sky stretching across the valley like a wave of thunder. The enemy ships above the hills began to crack and burn, falling one by one like metal birds losing their wings, crashing into the earth with screams that faded into ash. Daniel was thrown back by the force, hitting the wall hard and sliding to the ground. He opened his eyes slowly, coughing dust and tears, and looked toward the center of the chamber, where the sphere had once been. It was gone, and so was she. Only the empty cube remained silent, again cold, again lifeless. Again he crawled forward and placed his hand on the stone, hoping maybe there would be a sign, maybe she was still here in some way. Then he felt something, a small vibration under his palm, a warm hum like a heartbeat, and then a light from the wall behind the cube. A projection flickered to life. Her image standing tall, eyes calm, face peaceful. She looked at him and spoke one last time. "I gave you this world because you gave me your heart. Protect it, live for it, remember me." With every sunrise, Daniel closed his eyes and whispered her name. Once, then, again, then stood up, slowly breathing in the silence of a world now safe because of one life, one choice, one love. The morning was slow and soft as the first rays of light painted the desert with golden rose and silence. Daniel stood at the edge of the broken hill, where the final pulse had ended, the sky above clear for the first time in days. Not a ship in sight, not a shadow overhead, only wind and sunlight, and the quiet of something finally over. He held the small crystal Kyra had given him in his hand, still warm, still glowing faintly, as if her presence had not left completely, as if a piece of her had chosen to stay within the world. She gave everything to protect his fingers, closed around it gently, not to keep it safe, but to keep it close. He walked slowly down into the valley, where the remains of fallen machines still lay twisted and black, the ground scorched in lines where beams had struck and flames had danced. But now it was all still, now it was all quiet, and from that quiet something beautiful had begun to grow. Wildflowers peeked from the earth where fire had once burned. Birds returned to the sky, unbothered by metal wings or hunting lights. The world was beginning again, and Daniel was walking in it like a man reborn. He reached the place where the old truck had crashed, now nothing more than rust and memory, and sat by the tree where they had once rested, where she had played her strange music, and he had finally let his heart speak. Without sound, he closed his eyes and remembered her voice, not the words, but the way it felt when she spoke. Like calm rain, like distant stars, like something older than fear and deeper than pain. He let the silence speak back to him, and in that silence he heard her again. Not in sound, but in memory. The crystal pulsed once, and he saw her smile, not a goodbye, not sorrow, just peace. Weeks passed, and Daniel rebuilt what had been lost, not with machines or weapons, but with care. He found a small town nearby where people still remembered him as the quiet man who had disappeared into the desert and returned. With fire in his eyes and softness in his hands, he spoke little, but helped much, fixing broken things, planting seeds, teaching children how to listen to wind and watch the sky. He placed the crystal at the center of a garden he built with his own hands, a garden where the first green things began to rise again, where people came not to worship, but to feel peace, where no one asked what had happened, only accepted that something had changed, and it had made the world gentler. Children would often sit near the stone that marked the heart of the garden, asking questions about stars and space and strange songs. Daniel would smile and tell them a story, not about aliens or war, but about two souls who met in silence and chose to understand each other. Sometimes at night he would walk outside and look at the stars, tracing constellations Kyra once pointed at, even though she had no words for them, even though they belonged to another sky. He would speak softly to the wind, saying her name, saying thank you, saying I still remember. And somewhere far beyond that wind, in a part of the universe no human had ever seen, something shimmered with her light. Not gone, not lost, only transformed. Daniel never remarried, never left the land again. But he was never alone, because in every step he took, in every hand he held, in every child he taught, He carried her spirit forward, not as burden but as gift, not as past but as hope. The world healed not all at once, not loudly but slowly, like flowers, in frost like laughter, after silence like hearts, learning to beat again after breaking years later, when the garden had grown wild and full. Daniel placed a bench under the tree, where it all began, and carved her name into it with simple letters, and steady hands, then sat down and closed his eyes one last time. The wind moved gently through the leaves. The stars watched from above, and the earth below held him like an old friend. Two souls had met across worlds, had fought, had healed, and had saved not only a planet, but each other. And now the story was complete, not with an ending, but with a beginning, a new dawn rising over a world born again. Through courage, through kindness, through love.